Welcome to our Meet the Expert webinar. Global greetings to everyone who's participating live today, or those people who are listening to our on-demand playback session as this webinar is being recorded. My name is Dr. Yvonne Marie Andres, and I'm the co-founder of Global SchoolNet and the Education and Outreach Director for Global Forest Link. The purpose of Global Forest Link is to connect youth locally and globally, collaboratively investigate forest health, and to share their observations through digital stories. My colleague, Dr. Elena Yulova, and I want to welcome you to a special Meet the Expert with Rick Cooksey, who is the Acting Director for Forest Health Protection for the U.S. Forest Service in Washington, D.C. Today we have with us high school students from Francis Parker High School and their teacher, Rose Hanscom, and hopefully joining us partway into the webinar will be some students from Grossmont Unified School District in San Diego with their teacher, Donald Steinbach. So I would like to turn it over to Rick and have him introduce himself. Hi, Rick.
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Andres and Elena, for inviting me to join you today. This is a great pleasure. And hi, Francis Parker High School. Thank you for joining me in. I'm really excited to spend some time to hear why trees and forests matter. A little bit about what does this mean, forest health protection? What do we do? And why it's important to us as people. So just a minute about me. I have been working for the U.S. Forest Service for over 25 years, and I really feel so lucky to work for a public agency that its motto is to care for the land and to serve people. Our mission is to sustain the health and the diversity of the nation's forests and grasslands, to meet the needs of present and future generations. So this means a lot to me. It actually had a lot to do, it shaped my life actually in a way that I'm with the Forest Service because when I was young, I used to live in the country and there were forest trees all around farms, and I was very fortunate to be able to play in the streams and the fields and the forests that were all around where I lived. But over time, as I grew up, I watched those farms and those forests turn into big housing developments, and I got to see the change that. So we lost wildlife, we lost the areas to play, and I decided that that is what I wanted to do into the future, was to help forests and to make sure they were healthy, you know, for my kids. I'm very lucky to do that now. I have two daughters that are in high school as well, and they don't like to spend as much time as I do in the forest, but they do enjoy getting outdoors, and so it's a really meaningful thing for me. Next slide.
So I just want to say that, you know, it's so important to be aware, and I know you're going to talk about how the forest benefits our quality of life, and also want to just mention that when we talk about forest, it's not just wilderness, it's the tree cover and canopy everywhere, and you know, in our parks and in the wilderness and so on. So I know that a lot of cities across the United States and certainly around the world are really putting a lot of effort into urban forest planning. So the timing for this is perfect. So what I'm going to do right now is do a screen share. So if you give me 1 second here, I'm going to find the presentation, and I'm going to say share screen. And if it works, you will now see the first slide.
Very good.
Perfect.
And then it would be nice to let everyone else mute their microphones, probably.
And you can go to the next one, Andres.
I'm sorry. Once again, go to the next slide.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is thank you for sharing that, because that's really an important thing to share. You know, so I think that many times when we think about the forest, we think about these big, expansive places, maybe like national forests, or maybe areas that we think that we have to drive to visit, and it's not true. I mean, there are places right in our backyards, right in our neighborhoods, where we can experience nature and forests all around us. So, excuse me. So let me just take a few minutes, tell you what we do here at the U.S. Forest Service regarding forest health protection. What does this mean when we look at forest health protection, and how do we know when the forest is healthy? So we work with others to monitor, detect, and help to manage insects, disease, invasive species that affect our forests and grasslands. But we do work with others in order to do this across the country. We work with state governments, tribes, local governments, other federal agencies to look at both rural forests and urban forests. We provide technical assistance, and what that means, we have some of the leading scientists from around the world working with the Forest Service, and then we partner with at universities and, excuse me, still getting a cold, work with universities and at the state level, and also with nonprofit organizations. So we work with entomologists. These are scientists who are insect specialists. We work with pathologists and other scientists who focused on invasive species and other elements of forest health, ecologists, technology experts. We do survey and monitoring. So what does that mean? We actually have, we fly in airplanes and we survey over 500 million acres of forest across the country. We do this all from the air. We also have crews of people that are working on the ground, and there are many times they're students at universities, or they're citizen scientists like you who are out to assist us in looking from the ground to detect what might be going on, if there are insects or disease that are affecting the trees in the forest. We also do treatments. We do forest management to actually slow or stop the insects and the diseases from harming the trees. I'm sorry. There are some treatments which very interesting. We can place packets of literally scent, pheromone scent, which can send signals to insects to move away from trees. We can actually do the same thing that draw them to different trees. And we just manage forests because that will reduce the risk of the infestation actually harming the forest. And we also do technology development. We work on things like biocontrol. We bring in and work with insects which actually can be, they can prey on the insects that are harming the trees or the plants. Next slide, please. So let's take a minute and what's a healthy forest? It's something that, and why is that even important? Aren't just the trees and flowers and grasses, aren't they just, the fact that they're there, isn't that enough? Well, yes, it helps, it's good. But a healthy forest is a forest that has a series of species composition that live together, that can actually engage in ecological processes that are for that area. And there are native species that are working together, and they create an environment that support other plant and wildlife. A healthy forest is also one that can handle stress. Just like people, you know, if we are healthy and strong, we can handle pressure. We can be resilient against things that create change or impacts on us as people. The forests are exactly the same way. So when you have an area of forest that it might be experiencing a long-term drought, a healthy forest can handle that pressure more easily and not become vulnerable to insects or diseases. So why is that important? It's really important to us because we get so many things from the forest, and you think about, I just mentioned being out in terms of being outdoors and the opportunities and the fun that there is in doing that, the health benefits that we get back, but there's also things that we maybe even take for granted, such as clean, abundant water. In the U.S. Forest Service, just coming off of national forest lands, like I think the closest national forest that might be to your high school is the Cleveland National Forest. A national forest, over 20% of the water that people use around the country comes off of national forests. So next slide, please. Well, okay, we have challenges to our forests, and so I'd like to maybe take a moment, if it's okay, Dr. Andreas, to ask the students, what are a few of the challenges that they see coming every day to protecting and maintaining the healthy forests?
Absolutely. So let's let me switch here from the screen share. And Rose, if you want to unmute your students' microphones, they can speak with us.
Challenges are, what are some of our challenges?
Things like acid rain are a huge problem for the development of forests, and a lot of that is from pollution. So that's something.
But in San Diego.
In San Diego, yeah.
Yeah. John?
A drought.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
That's a very astute answer, and a big problem across the country.
Okay. And go ahead, John, try that again.
Drought.
So what are some ways to accumulate water? Because I believe we've had a couple discussions where like wastewater has been kind of an iffy issue here in California, as well as the cost of desalination is extremely expensive.
And of course, it's all related, but most recently and every year, a big threat for us is wildfires. And the drought, of course, adds to that with more shallow roots and drier vegetation. And it's a big concern for all of us living in Southern California.
It sure is. And you've named a number of really important things that are challenges. And one thing that I'd point out is that there's a big connection between the things that you mentioned. You know, there are natural cycles, right? That where we may have drought and not enough water, or we may have times when we're inundated with water. Both bring problems and stress, challenges to the forest, right? And they create circumstances which are just right for insects, disease, sometimes even the advance of invasive species, which the trees have low resistance. And then there's fire. And
if I could just interrupt for one brief second, I see our other participant from Grossmont Union High School, Don Steinbeck, the teacher, is joining us, and your students will be in pretty soon. Is that it?
They'll be coming in about 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Great.
All
We're
right,
so,
thank
we're
you.
so
Well,
happy that you can join us. So as you know, we were partly through the presentation. We're going to go back to. Let's wait to go back to your slides until his students come in, and then we can continue with this Q&A for a little bit.
Okay.
All right, so I mean, I don't want my conversation with them to getting in and getting in their seats.
You can mute your little mic there, and then when you're all settled in, just wave at us and we'll know.
All right, I'll do that. Okay,
great.
so I'll talk to you guys in a couple minutes. I'm going to kind of close the screen
Yep.
a little bit.
Okay.
All right, thank
Sure.
you.
Yep.
So Francis Parker, did you have any other questions, or should we move on?
Well, I would say that another challenge is like human impact. Like the forest that I went to had like trash and like some of the trails or like some of the trees were damaged.
Yes, it's how shall I say? People in forests go very well together, but sometimes we get conflicts. It's the truth. People drive through the forest with vehicles, and they're not careful with those vehicles, and they actually hit the trees. They don't understand that hitting the tree with a vehicle or a motorcycle or whatever is going to damage the tree, and it can make it vulnerable to dying. In terms of trash, I don't know. All I can say is please help us. It's a matter of just spreading the word and saying that it's not okay. That trash that goes around and through the forest, we wouldn't do that. Let's not do that. We wouldn't do that in our houses. Let's not do it in the forest. But you bring up a dilemma, right? Because you want to have people out in the woods enjoying what it has to offer, observing and understanding what forests do. And sometimes people they don't know, or they may not take care, and so maybe we can help them to learn.
I had a question.
Sure.
You said that if a forest is like dry, for example, it's more susceptible to diseases. What did you mean by that?
Well, if a forest, if trees have to go for very long, they can stand a fair amount of time without any rain or water input. But as you might know, it gets to a point, if it's too dry, then the roots will begin to desiccate. The needles and the foliage will indicate stress. So there are insects that, like in California, bark beetles, fur engraver beetles. They can sense when the trees are under stress, and they fly and they attack them. So they know, and then the beetles talk to each other. They send out pheromones, they send out a message that is like, dinner bell ringing, come this way. So you get even a greater intensity of insect infesting a particular area.
Right, and again, I want to just make the point, this is happening in the wilderness, but it's also happening in our neighborhoods. It's happening around our homes, the trees that are planted there. So, all of this, everything is connected. The weather, the drought, the fear of fires, and then mudslides, and the insects, the human development, cutting down a lot of the green area and then not replacing it. So it's all connected. And I know that Rick was talking a little bit earlier, how that affects us personally, our health, and our quality of life, and how, you know, the tree canopy, you know, helps with air pollution and, you know, water purification and all of those things. Great. So looks like our Grossmont High School is about to join us pretty soon. I'm going to switch back to the slide share.
Okay, and I'll
Let me
start going.
go right here, slide share, share screen, and PowerPoint. Here we go. And share screen. And let's go to, there we go.
Okay, now go to the next slide, please.
Yep.
So, hi, Grossmont High School. Thank you for joining us. And you're coming in at a place where we just start talking about the challenges that happen in the forest and insects and disease. How do those things start to impact forest health? And so now I'm going to talk about something that's of difference. And Dr. Andreas just made a good point there. Hey, these things are all connected, and in California, we've got, there are some challenges. And so let me just start by saying that some of these forest insects and diseases, they're not all bad. In fact, they do some important, wonderful functions for the forest. And we think about them in big scales and over larger time frames. So tens of thousands of species and insects are found in our forest, and many of them play extremely important roles: pollinating plants, recycling nutrients when the trees fall on the ground, and actually creating the decomposition of that vegetation so that those old trees become soil and feed future crops of trees. They actually provide, you know, the insects provide food for wildlife. And but some insects, under certain conditions, will impact the health of the forest and kill forests. So, like in this slide, you see the top picture there, and what you see are all of those dead trees. So what happened is you had a long time without rain or drought. The insects come in, they've killed the trees. Now they've created a condition where, you know, those trees are dead. Will the forest grow back? Yes, it will, but it'll take time. Right now, those trees dead, they can be an increased fire hazard, and they can create safety. So people moving through them, those trees are more vulnerable to falling down. So it's a threat to property. You know, just in the last few years, in 2016. Because of these insect infestations and resulting from the droughts that you've had there, 62 million trees have died across the state, up and down the Sierras. That's a tremendous amount of trees to have been impacted. So I wanted you to understand there's some of this is completely natural. This is what's happened in our forests over the millennia. The insects, they kill the older trees, the weaker trees. Fire comes in and cleanses the forest, and it renews. However, we live in a 2018 world in which people, the fire can't just move through the forest any longer. We have people who live there. And so we have to treat the forest differently. We have to manage the forest in a different way so that we are working with and living with in and around the forest. And so this is why we are very cognizant and clued in on things that indicate the forest health. Next slide, please. So that is to talk about trees that live in our environments, in our forest environments naturally, and the cycles of the forest and insects and all of that. We also have insects that come into our forest from other places. They're invasive. And what happens is that, you know, we live in a global world, and things come from all over the world. They come on crates, they come in pallets, they come in containers. We have plants that go to nurseries. People take those things and they plant these plants in their yard, and they may have insects or diseases that are from faraway places. They're brought here, and the forests and trees, they have no resistance. They have no natural enemies. And so they become very vulnerable to these things. You may have read about, well, down in your area, the shot-hole borer is an example of that. And you talk about in your parks, around your city, you may be seeing large oaks dying, other kinds of willows and other trees that are dying from the shot-hole borer. And it's because these trees have no natural resistance at all. Another tree or another insect is something called the emerald ash borer. And a couple slides ago, you know, there was that really beautiful green beetle, lovely, lovely beetle. It's a terror, and it has come into our cities, and it loves ash trees. And so in many cities and towns, they've planted, I moved to Washington, D.C. from Denver, Colorado. 70% of the trees that grow along the streets and in our parks are ash trees. And so emerald ash borers coming in was a real problem. We were very, very concerned about it. So this is something that what do we do? Well, we work to try to detect these insects before they get very far into this country. And so around the ports, we work in partnership with other federal agencies to look out for and detect excuse me, these insects, and we try to capture them before they get out. I'll tell you, it's a very, very hard job. And so we have literally hundreds of species that have gotten across the country from coming into these places. So let me ask you, can anyone kind of guess, with all of these factors, how many acres of forest do you think were actually impacted by insect disease last year? Does anyone have any idea, or have they looked on the web to kind of understand what that might be?
You're asking the students now?
Yeah, if anyone has an idea. And the next slide will give you the answer, but I thought I'd just test it out there.
40,000 what? We have a prediction of 40,000 acres of trees. Anybody else have any ideas?
55,000 acres.
You just guess how many acres is San Diego?
No, that's.
I don't know what the acreage of San Diego is. Does anybody know what the, like, say, they familiar with?
81 million.
I'll use the chat.
Yeah, I see that. So, Dr. Andreas, you can go to the next slide, and it'll give them the answer.
What is?
Okay. I just want to again welcome all the students that joined us. I know you couldn't be here from the beginning, but we can stay a little bit longer, and hopefully you have a chance to get all your questions answered and meet one another. So let me go back to a screen share and here, and you should see the next slide. Go into the presentation. And there we go. Okay, everybody seeing that?
Yeah, there you have it. So that's a tremendous area, right?
To give us an idea, can you give us an idea of what 7.9 million acres, is that the state of, what state in say the United States, or what city?
Sure. I mean, that's the size of Rhode Island. if you look across the entire country. I mean, so its scale is significant. So what you're looking at there is, so that's Bass Lake, north of you and up near the Sierra National Forest, so a little north of LA. But again, what it shows is that where you are absolutely looking at a forest under change, and it's not going to be destroyed or forever, but it is absolutely under change. And so when the forest changes, there can be impacts that, for one, it's certainly a visual impact. Maybe it affects recreation and people wanting to go out, so safety can be an issue. But it's something that I wanted to point out. So let's turn the page. Let's go to the other part of the equation. So in a healthy green spaces and healthy forests, what do they do for us? Dr. Andreas, you were talking earlier, you were starting to mention, let's be connected with and understand some of the benefits. So next slide, please. And I love this slide because, being in forests, being outdoors, and this person running right, in the out of doors, it equals human health. So why do we care? Do they really help us that much? I mean, we know that when people, when we cut down trees, we can use them. We use that wood for building homes, for making paper, for all kinds of different products. But the forests right in our neighborhoods, right in and around you, they do so much for us. So trees, their leaves and their needles, they literally scrub the air. They capture the particulates and the dust, and they act as a big filter as the winds blow through the trees. They filter water, literally the water that goes into the ground and comes up through the roots and vaporizes into the air. It becomes pure. It is when water passes through the roots and they go into the stream. They are buffered. They are clean. The trees in your city. I mean, San Diego is a wonderful place, and you have very moderate temperatures. I can tell you in Washington, D.C. in July, there is no greater refuge than to be under a tree when you're out here, because the heat is unbelievable. And so the trees provide that protection from the heat. It cools the area. It actually reduces noise. And so, that is a place for people to have some protection. There is, when people who are living near parks and green spaces, they're people who go and they use them, they're more physically active. There's studies that indicate that literally taking a walk in the woods can lower your stress, lessen your mental distress. So trees can help you live longer. And there is, people have been studied and they actually improve your cognitive brain function. So spending time in the woods can make you smarter. So there's so many things. And no, but seriously, the strong evidence that I was talking to Dr. Andreas and Elena earlier, that actually makes the linkage, especially like with children, that playing in the outdoors, being in the forest, that it can have a positive impact on things like attention deficit disorder. It can actually reduce depression, anxiety, mood disorders. So these are things that, especially for children, can create an environment where they can concentrate better. They can have, they literally can breathe more healthfully and have relief from the impacts of asthma. So there you have it. Taking care of trees, spending time outdoors with them can make you smarter, happier, and healthier. So what are you waiting for? Very good. Next. Okay.
You say next, but you were asking for another question?
No, the next. I'm sorry. The next slide. I have to ask for the next slide.
Yeah, let's get finished with a couple more slides, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
That would be fantastic. And so, and we're approaching the end here. And so, what I would say is, so what can you do? What can you do to play a role in this? Well, for one, and I'm sure you've been hearing my message, get outside. It is good for you. Bring your friends, bring your family. It is you will enjoy it and your family will too. When you're out there, pay close attention. What do you see? What do you hear? Take notes. Be a citizen scientist. We need your help. And then lastly, lend a hand. There are activities in your community. Get your friends together and pitch in on some projects in your area. This slide indicates some resources that I'd welcome you to go and check out. I think you'll find them very, very interesting. The first is this iNaturalist website. It's an app, it's free, and it's a citizen science project, an online social network for naturalists and citizen scientists. And so there's ways to do mapping and enter in your observations onto the website. And so on this site, I mean, there have been over 8 million observations since 2008. So it is really a standard bearer. The second one is the one you notice in the lower left right-hand corner called iTree. Excuse me. And so it's free, it's easy to use, and what it does is it actually gives you information about the trees. It can help you to enter in information so you can get calculations of the tree cover type and even some of the value of the trees in your community. And so you can add that in, and it's very easy, including like some of the economic value and the ecosystem services that are provided by those trees. Another is please check out the Descubre el Bosque site, the Discover the Forest site, and this will give you opportunities. It'll give you information on opportunities to go out and engage and to do community projects and to work with your teachers, and even there's curriculum materials in there that are very, very helpful. And then lastly, there's something called the Agents of Discovery, and it's a completely free app that uses the latest kind of gaming technology, and it's meant to get kids out and engaged. And it's kind of a forest explorer, kind of the Pokemon Go kind of approach. So those are just a couple of ideas.
So Rick, if we could ask you if there's room for one more resource to add on there. The next time you do this, maybe you can add on Global Forest link.
Absolutely. Yes. How could we forget? You know?
So in Global Forest Link, we've actually taken a lot of the concepts that you said, get out in the forest, make observations, take notes. that's a big part of global forest link, because what the students do is they go out into either wilderness parks, green spaces, they take photographs, they take video, they take notes, and then they come back, they upload those to a platform, and they meta tag those with different references, and that goes into a great big database. So they are becoming citizen scientists. Then the ultimate thing is they become evidence-based journalists by telling their stories. We want them to share their observations, because they're only, one person or a dozen people or 100, even 1,000 students going out there doing that. But they can share their stories, via Global Forest Link with students and the public all over the world. So we try to incorporate all those things you said into one project. So thank you for sharing these other resources with us.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that that we're doing this, and it supports the work you're doing. That's very great. The next slide, it just goes on, and it gives some additional resources that you may be interested in. The first is the Forest Health Protection website, and it gives a lot of data. It goes into greater depth, some of what I talked about today, but there are the Green Cities Good Health sites, the Vibrant Cities Lab, and then Tree Search are additional resources that you can look at some of the concepts that I was talking about today.
Wonderful. So now I am going back to all of us here, and I want to give. I know Rose's students have to leave. They have to leave sooner than Don's students. So, are there any questions or comments or anything from Francis Parker students?
Yeah, thank you.
So, especially during summer, like San Diego gets a lot of tourists, and because of that, there's a lot of light and sound pollution that affects the environment, especially a lot of the nocturnal animals such as sea turtles, owls, and other nocturnal animals. So what's like a good way to mitigate that? Because we can't really take away street lights or the hotels. So what's a good way to prevent that, the harmful environmental effects from happening?
Well, I wish I could give you an answer. The answer that I would suggest is the one that you just aligned out as a challenge. So in some coastal areas, because light is an issue for turtles, businesses and hotels, waterfront homeowners have gotten together in some places, and especially during critical times of the year, have made the commitment to keep their lights off. And it makes a big difference. When in terms of owls and other things, it's again, if you notice that there are owls in your area that may be nesting, talk to your neighbors. Literally, it's only a matter of weeks, and it can make a difference in whether they can find partners or not. But you have to do it together, because you're right, the lights will distract them.
That's a great question, by the way. I hadn't heard that one come up in the 2 years that we've been doing this. Nobody's really addressed that. So we'd love to see a digital story about that.
Just take the lessons.
Yeah.
Thank you.
By the way, I will make the slideshow available. So if you want to, have access to all those resources and references, you'll be able to do that. Rick, I actually have a question. What kinds of careers can people, career paths can people take to be connected with the forestry industry?
Well, I thank you for asking that. And there's so many different pathways. I can tell you that it can be as diverse as the pathway that I took. So my undergraduate degree isn't in environmental science. It's actually in social science. I worked as a stockbroker on Wall Street, and I went back to graduate school and I got a degree in working in this field. but there are so many opportunities to work in the forest. And what I would recommend is if you have an interest in this, talk to your state parks department. Talk to the U.S. Forest Service. There are jobs on the National Forest. You can do them for a portion of the summer, and you can get an idea if working in the woods, working in helping to rebuild trails, helping to make sure that the sites that people go to for camping and for other activities, if they're beneficial and you enjoy them. Those are a couple ideas.
So I see Francis Parker, they're leaving, their class was over at 1:55, but I know that Rose will share. Yeah, she'll share all this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Rose.
I also have a question, if possible. How do you see the role of the students in educating their communities on the state of the forest, on the importance of the forest, on the stress that the forests undergo in their communities because of the climate change, and basically like feeding back into the resilience of their community?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and so there's some simple aspects to that, and then there's some more complicated ones. The simple ones are get involved. There are nonprofit organizations that I'm sure that are operating throughout the city that are doing just that. They can be Friends of a Park. They can be again the San Diego Parks Department and things like entities like that, local government entities, where they would love to have the students come and do monitoring of the forest, help them to gather information and data so that they can learn what's happening out there. Then there's activism. There's speaking out about what they see and what they know. Earlier, someone said, hey, what's up with all that trash in the forest? Well, there's ways that people can take, if some of these voices say, please, don't do it. We all want to use this place. This is having an effect. They will listen to the students, maybe more than they will listen to me out there saying, please don't throw this stuff on the ground.
Great. Let's go back to Grossmont. Were there any comments or questions? I know you sort of joined us late, but
I think we have one question that I know that I've contemplated and I've talked with my students a little bit is often we're asked to recycle, and recycle we know does help reduce the number of trees that need to be cut. I guess the question is there been research about the carbon footprint? Because when you research, someone has to come and pick up that, and that's burning fossil fuels. And so I was interested in seeing some research about how effective recycling actually is, because a lot of man hours and a lot of fossil fuels are spent on just collecting that rubbish and then sorting through it. And so I was just wondering if recycling, if there's evidence on actually how many trees it actually prevents from being cut down.
So that's an outstanding question, and it's always one of those that I always wish the answer was a little bit more clear and more positive than it really is. So let's talk about the positive first. There are markets for recycled products, recycled paper, that are greater today than they have ever been before, and it's increasing. So there was a point in time 15 years ago, where there weren't as many products. Even though we were recycling a lot of paper, we were ostensibly saving a lot of trees. We really weren't, because the companies that were making paper or making products, they wanted trees to do this, and they weren't willing to use paper. Many more products can use that recycled paper. And there are the complications that you do mention. Just picking up at our curbside bringing it to locations. And in fact, many of these companies that are using high amounts of recycled paper, they're not even in this country. So they're being sent to faraway places. So in some cases, the carbon footprint is, if you compare a tree harvested off of a forest in California and used and turned into paper versus a product that was made from recycled paper, the carbon might not be so different.
And related to that, here in the state of California, we have gotten rid of our paper grocery bags and voted in a policy of using plastic. And I guess I think that would be a good environmental sense if everybody recycled their plastic. But I have a fear and an idea that a lot of people do not. And so in the effort of actually helping the environment, they might actually be doing worse. Do you have any comment on that?
Uh-huh.
Lose connection.
No, you're there. I just didn't have anything to add to that.
Students, do you have any other? We have about 4 minutes left of class. Do you have any questions that you can ask regarding state of forest or anything?
So if there's 4 minutes left, I would like to just make a request that that you do take one action after participating today, that you tell a friend or tell a parent something that you learned today, that you join our Global Forest Link Facebook community where we're always sharing resources and ideas, and if nothing else, that you at least hug a tree.
So thank you. So is there any other questions about forest? I guess I had one other thought. I mean, here in San Diego, we don't really have a lot of coniferous forests. We have to go up to Laguna, the Cuyamaca Mountains, which for us is about a 60-minute drive at least. So really the forest that really surrounds us, the Cleveland National Forest, is mostly coastal sage scrub, chaparral type plants. So in a lot of these conversations, I mean, that's the forest that surrounds us. So I guess all these thoughts and talk.
So one of the things that we mentioned earlier on is that when we say forest, we don't just mean wilderness. We mean your parks, tree canopy, neighborhood parks, wherever there's trees, those are what we refer to as urban forests, and it's all connected. So it's not just, this thing that you go to, the forest. It's really all around us. And we said this earlier, but in many cities around the world, they're developing urban forest plans that balance the tree cover with with the residential living areas.
One last question, I guess I was thinking of, when people out there, manufacturers, want to make a product using paper, what's the legal requirement, say, of a company that's harvesting trees? Is there a requirement they have to plant a certain number of trees in order to cut one down?
The answer is no. But what companies do today is they do replant very significantly. When we cut trees in the national forest, we reforest, we replant, and there's a practical sense, and then there's an ecological sense. I mean, if you're taking something away and you're investing in your future products by planting new trees.
I can add to this a little bit. There is this Sustainable Forestry Initiative, the US-Canada initiative, where they certify the business, and if they're using any products that are using trees. And this is a very very hard process to get this certification, but they are advertising these products, and like lots of responsible citizens are buying these products as opposed to similar products but not certified.
Well, thank you very much. We're Monte Vista. We're just about to end our class, so thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you. So this is your Monte Vista High School and Grossmont Unified, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm having a hard time getting you right now. Thank you. Nice to see you tomorrow.
Thanks. So yeah, if you can mute your mic, that would be great. Don. So yeah, thank you to all the students and the teachers, and thank you especially to Rick for sharing your time on your inaugural Meet the Expert webinar with our Global Forest Link program. Hopefully we'll have you convince you that you need to talk to us again, maybe during our next session. And we'll be sharing this recording and sharing your slides and hopefully working with you in the future.
Okay.
Elena, did you have any comments?
No, thank you so much. Yeah, it was really interesting, and I love the kids' questions and your answers.
I always learn something every time we do one of these. All right,
thank you
everyone.
very much. It was great to talk with you both.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.